sheriff put on a session on scams, and that was 20 years ago. And I can only imagine that they've gotten worse now, how the scams are, and particularly as it relates to the elder community. So Megan, welcome. What are some of the ways that the elderly are taken advantage of?
So I think it's important to understand elder fraud as a concept in general. So, elder fraud is the misappropriation or abuse on a financial scale where there's usually an expectation of trust and it results in harm to an elderly victim. And the stats with elder fraud are kind of mind-blowing. The Consumer Fraud Protection Bureau has estimated that on a yearly basis that the damages as a result of elder fraud or the losses range anywhere from like $3 billion to almost $37 billion in a year. And even the high range of that estimate, they anticipate is underreported. And that's because a lot of times when anybody's a victim of fraud, but especially the elderly are victims of fraud, there's a level of embarrassment and it's not reported. So that $37 billion number in 1 year is actually considered to be low. But the ways that the elderly are taken advantage of, there's exploitation, and that is usually in like a fishing situation, which I'll talk about in a little bit, not like fishing on a lake or something like that. But it's there's an element of pressure that is factored into a situation, and that element of pressure leads to exploitation. And in those situations, there's like the grandchild scheme that's going around where a scammer will call an elderly victim and say something like, your grandkid's in trouble and either they're in jail or something like that, and you have to send X amount of money to this destination or your grandkid's going to be in trouble. And grandparents want to protect their grandkids, so that's typically that's a common way that the elderly are exploited, that type of situation. Even now, I've been getting a lot of phone calls from PSE&G saying that PSE&G, it's not actually them, saying that if I don't, give them my bank account information, my electricity is going to be shut off. That they, something happened, but I'm on automatic billing. So it's, in my mind, it's a scam, but that exploitation and pressure can lead to a type of fraudulent situation.
But you don't look that elderly to me, though.
Well, I'm going to get to how the elderly are specifically exploited. But yeah, I get those calls all the time. It's just today. And even me, I get this call and I know that I'm enrolled in automatic pay and I don't have to worry about my electricity being shut off. But there's still that part of your brain that's like, oh no, like I have to get this sorted out. So exploitation is definitely one way. Another way is fraud due to identity theft. And I'll talk about how, a lack of, technical savvy can play into that. And then there's also trust abuse. And that is when, and this one is really troubling and happens frequently, unfortunately, but it's when family, friends, or caretakers kind of abuse their position as a caretaker with the elderly victim in order to gain access to like bank accounts or any other personal information like that. So that unfortunately happens pretty frequently when someone's in a position of trust and they violate that.
So when I said you don't look that elderly to me, and you said that you're going to get to it, why are the elderly targeted so much, do you think, though?
So I'm not saying this, in a discriminatory way towards our older generation, but there is a lack of technical knowledge or savvy. I'm just thinking of my Nana, who I love dearly, and if my mom's watching this at some point, I promise I won't get too much into Nana specifics, but like she does not have a laptop, an iPad. She has a cell phone, but very rarely uses it. But because she very rarely uses these things, especially like her cell phone, being contacted on her cell phone by these kind of scam calls leaves her susceptible to not knowing, maybe I shouldn't be telling PSE&G, this fake PSE&G, or the fake IRS that calls on Sunday morning asking for your social security number. That lack of technical knowledge plays a factor in that. There's also, how many of our grandparents have retired and moved to Florida. So there is a geographical separation between family members. And when you don't have that ability to kind of be around your family member and notice their behavior patterns, it's hard to help. And that kind of plays into the frauds being unreported too, because if you're not around to help in these situations, it can kind of go unrecognized. There's also cognitive decline, unfortunately. My grandma she suffered from Alzheimer's for a long time. And I think the statistic is that 1 in 10 people over the age of 65 suffer from either Alzheimer's or dementia. And that disease can play into an elderly person being susceptible to fraud, especially when it's in a position of trust. I worked on a project where this woman, she lived alone, and I can't remember, I believe it was her nephew, started kind of, making himself known in her life, hadn't really had a presence prior to her cognitive decline. And, he started hanging around, driving her places, sort of, buying her groceries, things like that. Even just hanging out with her and providing this level of comfort just to have someone to talk to. But there was really a nefarious angle to it, in the sense that he got her to sign a power of attorney. And then when that happened, he had access to her bank accounts, and then he helped himself to whatever he wanted, money-wise, from the bank accounts. So
it's funny, whenever I talk with all clients of any age and I need them to sign a power of attorney for tax purposes, I have to make sure they understand I will only have access to your tax information, not your banking information. I want them to know that.
Yeah.
If for nothing else, I want them to have a comfort level that I'm not trying to do anything nefarious, but I also don't want them saying to their friends at the tennis club or a cricket club, wherever they are, saying, yeah, I gave my account, my power of attorney, and all of a sudden they're reporting me for doing it.
Yeah.
Because there are people out there that do that.
Yes, there certainly are. I've seen it, in my job, and I've seen it happen more than once. So there's that, definitely the cognitive decline, unfortunately, plays a big part in that. And also, even you're just not as sharp. So maybe something that prior to the onset of dementia or Alzheimer's would have caused, a red flag in your mind. It may not once this disease kind of takes hold. So that's definitely another factor. The fact that a lot of the elderly are on a fixed income makes them a target for a lot of these, fraudsters that are sending out the phishing emails or the scam phone calls. They target the elderly because they know that they're on a fixed income, so that they know that they have some kind of funds that they could take advantage of. And the last one is that, I've seen this statistic, and I suppose, or this quality about elderly victims, and I suppose that it is true because I've seen it a lot. And it's that, you think of grandparents and they are more empathetic, and it kind of falls into that, how they fall victim to these scams where somebody's in trouble because they are more empathetic and more willing to kind of jump in and try to help. I've seen that a lot in my research of elder fraud. So that's one thing that comes up a lot, is that these people are more empathetic and want to help. And this desire to help, unfortunately, results in fraud sometimes.
It's a good intention sometimes that puts them in this situation. And you mentioned about the distance, and that's key. I mean, my mother-in-law lived in Florida for a while till we had to bring her up here. I wish my mother would move away, but anyway, I hope she's not watching. Now, and I listened to my wife and my sister-in-law talk about what she was doing, and you start wondering, okay, should we be identifying things? What are, or do you know some red flags that people can watch for in talking to the relatives, or not just their relatives, might even be a neighbor that they're talking to?
Yeah, exactly. Like, that's one thing to keep in mind with being aware of the possibility of elder fraud. You know, you may not have elderly relatives, but you could have, know some people in your life that could be susceptible to this. So it's important to be proactive when it comes to elder fraud and financial abuse. But some red flags would definitely be a change in behavior and a change in mood, and that could be in a negative or a positive way. You wouldn't necessarily think positive, but if you hear someone talking about, they're excited about some kind of like lottery that they won, but to gain access to these funds, they have to make an advance payment first. That is a red flag, because that's not a thing. Like, you don't win the lottery but have to pay first. But these lottery scams are a way that fraudsters target people. So they will, the thing is like, oh, you've won this kind of money, but to release the funds, you just have to pay us first. And so if you see some kind of like excitement about that, that is a red flag. And also, mood changes in a negative way. Like I said earlier, these frauds frequently go unreported. So if you have an elderly friend or relative and their mood changes in a negative way, it's something to consider, like maybe they have been a victim of some kind of fraud. And also if you notice a difference in spending habits, like if they are going to ATMs frequently, if they are purchasing gift cards in large sums at somewhere like Target or something like that. Now, fortunately, these bigger stores like Target and Walmart, they have educated their employees to let them know that if you see someone buying gift cards in bulk, to kind of alert somebody or try to understand what's going on there. Because like in these grandchild type of things, where like somebody's in trouble and you just have to send these gift cards and they won't be in trouble anymore. That's a way that people get caught up in these things. So definitely changes in spending patterns. That's another red flag to be aware of.
Okay. That's great information. And now I know why. I was actually in a drugstore, a CVS, Walgreens type of place. And it was a younger person that wanted to buy gift cards. And they said, we only have a limit on a dozen or 6 or whatever it was. And the woman said, oh, I'm buying it for my office, to give out my office. They said, well, sorry, you have to buy a couple batches of them. So now I understand why. I just thought that they were being a pain in the neck or inventory control. But we're approaching our 15 minutes. I want to thank you. I mean, my introduction to this was the John Cusack movie. I think it was Say Anything, when he was holding the radio up.
Yeah.
He was dating, it was Ione Skye, and her father owned a nursing home, and he was taking the money from people. So that's the only time I ever thought about it. And I didn't think about the depth that it could go. And the problem is, us sitting home for these months that we've been sitting home now, you've had the news on, and I think about it as you were talking in the very beginning. I'm saying to myself, I can buy gold, I can buy all this other stuff, which would be a scam, but there's not any public awareness messages out there enough.
Yeah.
So I appreciate you bringing this information to light and letting people know, and hopefully they can share this with people in the community they feel need to hear or help the people. But if people do have questions, they should reach out to you because you have a lot more information than what you're able to provide in 15 minutes. But I want to thank you for sharing what you did share so far. And
Yeah, my parting wisdom here is that never click a link in an email that you don't know who the email is from. Even if it looks like it could be from, say, Bank of America, just be aware of links in emails that you are clicking, because that is one of the biggest ways in that people fall victim to social engineering is through these phishing emails. So just be aware of things that you get in your email and where they're coming from and where they are taking you.
Thank you for that. And Glenn Taylor's happy that you're saying that too.
You're welcome.
I want to thank everybody else for joining us.